Hello, I am Everett Maxine, and thank you for listening in to The Absence of Her. Please like, follow, and most importantly, share. No one notices your tears. No one notices your sadness. No one notices your pains, but they all notice your mistakes. In Luke chapter 8, it speaks about a woman that had an issue of blood for 12 years, and Jairus' daughter who was dying and was 12 years old. The number 12 symbolizes God's power and authority. The number 12 is a symbol of faith, and if you have ever attended a church service, you've probably heard Hebrews 11:1. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Hebrews 11:3. Through faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that things which are seen were not made of the things which do appear. Through your faith means you must already have faith waiting to be activated. What we see visually was not created by anything that existed. God spoke, and there was power in his words and within him. And he resides in us, so therefore we have power to speak life into existence. So I ask you today, do you feel like whatever issue that you've had for years can't change? So you just live with it? If you see a situation that's dying, do you call it dead before it's absolutely over? Or do you choose to activate the faith and power that is within you to speak life and to speak healing? In 2004, for several weeks, my mother had sinus issues. But we were used to it because it happened so often. But then her skin began to look clammy, and I questioned if she needed to see a doctor. She never went. October 18th of 2004, I would have a voice message. My mother had collapsed at home and was rushed to the hospital by my father. All that time, she had bronchitis, pneumonia, and had an asthma attack on top of that. Back then, my mother was a heavy smoker and a functioning alcoholic, something I spent my entire childhood being ashamed of because I did not understand that alcoholism is a disease and that my mother had hurtful voids in her own life she was trying to fill. I remember praying for God to change her because my mother could be an absolutely sweet, beautiful, spirited person until she drank. It made her mean. It made her evil. But God does his work on his own time. And God is the only person who can change people. We cannot force change upon people. On that day, October 18th of 2004, I headed to the Matagorda General Hospital. Mom would become upset when the nurse would try to take her ice away because the cold would not help her lungs. And although she was alert, they could not keep her calm. Her nail color was gray, displaying the decreased oxygen in her system. My aunts would arrive and began discussing how my mother looked like Ernestine, my grandmother, who had passed a couple of years before due to respiratory issues. I had to remove myself from the negative talk. I would walk to my former mother-in-law's home and we began to pray. I couldn't afford to spend not one moment sulking about the situation or what it looked like in the physical. I had learned and read my God had healed the sick and raised the dead, but personally, had not had any real life experiences. When I returned to the hospital, she was knocked out with tubes going through her body. She was life flighted to Memorial Hermann that day, where she would remain for a month. That first week was one of the hardest weeks of my life, as my mother lay comatose and silent. My father was then struggling with his own demons. I had no car, and Houston was over an hour away, so I very seldom got to visit. After a couple of days, the doctors would put her in a state of paralysis to save her life, because she kept moving her body all through the night. As the week progressed, her health did not. The doctors would say they had done all that they could do. When my sister took me to visit, I would take some blessed oil, and as I entered the ICU, a visiting minister would look at her and say, "She's gone. She doesn't hear anything we're saying." I asked him to leave and never to return. My Bible in one hand, I read from it and anointed her body with oil with the other. The power, you see, was not in the oil, but my faith. I left that night comforted that God was in control, whether he chose to heal her on earth or heal her by transitioning her to heaven. On the 8th day, I received a phone call. Her voice a little raspy, but it was my mama on the other end, awake, alert, and alive. She had to learn how to do the simple things all over again, holding a towel to wipe her face and learning to walk. As soon as she was placed in a regular room, she would request a walker. The nursing staff would tell her no, she'd have to wait. So, determined, she began leaning on the bed and sliding her feet until they brought her a walker. By the beginning of the following year of 2005, she would be ready to return to work. The doctors would tell her she could no longer smoke, but to my surprise and others, she no longer had a taste for alcohol. For her remaining 14 years on earth, she would not only be saved through Jesus Christ and increase her church attendance, but was also sober. Her issues did not make her a bad person, but God had the opportunity to make her better for his purpose. I wonder, had I listened to that minister and decided to call my mother, who was still breathing, dead, and never prayed. I wonder if I never had faith in the power of God, what would have happened to her? I wonder just how many people feel that they're stuck in a situation, and because of the longevity of the issue, they feel it cannot change. If you are that person, that you go to work, but you come home and smother yourself in alcohol due to loneliness and depression. You want to make better money, but you smoke marijuana daily just to get through whatever issues are ailing you. You have a terminal illness and people have already called you dead when you're still very much alive. You stop going to school and never finish that degree, and because it's been a 10-year gap, you feel like, hey, there's no point in going back. You've lived your life in the streets. You tried to rehabilitate, and you just gave up because nobody said you could do it. I wonder what would happen if you activated your faith today. If you went to God and said, God, I'm bringing you these issues. God, I will have the faith because I know you have the power and authority to heal me, to change me, if I submit to you. In order to trust your process for your healing, there'll be some friends you have to shake loose. Some family members you may have to tune out. Some life adjustments and rearrangements. But if you are truly committed to God, He will be truly committed to you and your efforts to change. Why keep living with issues when God desires to make you better? Are there people judging you by the size you are, and they don't understand that you ate yourself into your depression? They don't understand how lonely you feel at night, or that you don't sincerely have someone to talk to about what you're going through? Do you have AIDS or HIV and regret the choices you made in your past and don't feel like you're worthy of God to heal you? That you can't see a positive outcome in your situation? I beg you to trust Him. Do not allow someone to speak death upon you when the breath of life is still within you. Believe in God today and believe in yourself and your faith to make you whole. Thank you for listening to The Absence of Her. Please remember to like, follow, and share.